What's going on, everybody? This is the blockchain backer, bringing you the latest cryptocurrency news and analysis. Welcome to the end of the week. We've got the Bitcoin price chart pulled up here in front of us. We'll also take a peek over there at Ethereum, and we'll talk about the altcoin market, and we'll talk about the importance of the current XRP price level that we're at right now. Prices have been relatively stable, really just still Bitcoin bouncing in this range since December 16th. In my last couple of videos this week, pointing to what we've been talking about really for the last several weeks and several months, with these assets moving back to the top of the range, then falling back down to then go into a grueling, grinding sideways period. We're getting through that period. Now it's just kind of stalling out in here, waiting on price action to play out. These are things that we've expected for weeks now. Like I've showed in videos from this week and referencing back to what we were talking about last month on price action, as I've shown in many of these reversal structures, a lot of times we come back down to these lows and just start doing it all over again from lower prices once again. So we're kind of just in a wait period now. So long as there isn't some type of just magical breakout candle taking us back above the top of the range that was set there back on December 13th and 14th. This was really my thought process of what's going on in here. And over the last week or two, I've shown extra clips and extra charts to show how this typically happens in here. So really just kind of in a paused out period. And that same thing goes for Bitcoin. I mean, it has literally just gone sideways as expected. Now the question is, when do we get a move and how deep and how aggressive is the move that is going to come? As we all know, there's a lot of fear out there in the market over Digital Currency Group and Grayscale and January 8th with Genesis and Gemini and all of that. I don't know how all of that is going to play out. It does remind me a lot of back in July of 2021 when the market was very fearful about a Grayscale Bitcoin trust unlocking that was going to be happening. And Grayscale was at the center of the attention. Then once that date passed, nothing occurred. The prices moved their way up as if it was part of the catalyst. But right now we're waiting on Bitcoin and the markets to make a move. I've spent a good enough time just staring at this structure because I'm sure for many, just staring at this thing, you don't think to yourself, man, that looks like a reversal. That looks like a big fat trend reversal that has happened in here that's ready to go like this. If anything, it just still looks like stair stepping down in here, right? But of course, that comes from bias of just feeling it continue to move down in here. And every step that happens, we think more steps are going to be coming. But sometimes what I'll do is I'll invert these things right in here to look at them from this perspective to say, hey, man, is this actually what the tops of these look like before a reversal ends up happening? Is this what end of trend looks like? We know that we see all that on the indicators when it comes to weekly RSI, weekly MACD, monthly MACD. We see all the indicators of what happens when reversals happen for Bitcoin. But with price action, we just look like stair stepping. So what I'll do sometimes is I'll invert it because I do see this. I have seen this many times. This is exactly how we were able to pinpoint the top of Bitcoin back in 2022. This is how we were playing out when that happened. Is that this structure right here, all of this happened two different times. And so obviously we have the top of Bitcoin down here on the bottom of the screen. We have current price action right in here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to inverse this price chart right here to get rid of the biases and to start making things look a little bit more familiar to see this is how the reversals end up playing out. Notice the grind finishes with an ABC, then it capitulates. Grind, ABC, capitulates, and that is how the endings happen. But it happens on bigger time frames as well. So I'll zoom this out even more and I'll take all of these things off the screen so you can see it in here that this is also how the reversal happened, in which everybody also thought that we were going to go into much higher prices in here. And let me invert that back so we could see that again. Everybody's thinking that we were going to go way higher in here, but I did not think we were. And we were looking at this on the inverse price chart to show this is how these happen, right? You set these new lows and that becomes the end of it in here. And even here on the massive time frames, this is what we had happening in here. For capitulation came with a new low, and then that ended up being it, and that was the reversal of the whole market. But of course, we're used to it being that way, so all of our biases are the same as we've come down here. But I thought I'd show that to you on smaller time frames of, man, like let's pretend we're right there. You'd think to yourself, man, this looks bad. This looks like this is going to go down even further, right? Which is the same thing as what's been happening in here. Man, this looks bad. Like this is going to go down even further. All your same stuff happening in here. However, that marks the reversal. And we invert it back. And there you go. Now you can see it. It's like, oh, well, yeah, that's obvious now. But That's how these things go. So you can kind of see them on two different time frames there and how those tops came in for Bitcoin. You can see it back in here. And for fun, what I've done here is I've put us on the 1 hour time frame and kind of deleted the price action after here to show this is Bitcoin from back in April of 2021 on the inverse price chart. And we can see this is actually the reversal point for Bitcoin right in here. And so I'll take that off. And now we can see it. This was the reversal and invert it. And then now it's what we all are familiar with and we all remember here. But what we're talking about is this moment in time right here that marked the final end to the trend in which we had been going uptrending, 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 uptrending. But that was the end. Invert it. That's where we're at right now, right? But then it goes beyond that too. So we go to a bigger time frame in here, zoom out, and we look at it from this aspect of what we all know right in here. Invert it again, go back and look at it from this aspect. And what do we see happen in here? It's the same thing. That this is how the trend ended. This is how the reversal happened, and that it's the same thing. So notice in this example, there's this new dip to a new low that happens in here for Bitcoin, which of course is a new high before things turn over. Then notice in here, there's not. So that's kind of where we're at right now, is that there's probably a sell-off coming in here like we've been talking about this week, but just waiting to see it stop and settle. And then at that point, it's nothing but green arrows and imminent breakout coming and thumbnails. So this is your classic ending. And we can look at it from the other aspect too. We'll flip it the other way and look at it like that to see what the peak of Bitcoin looked like back in April of 2021. And that was how the peak ended up coming in here. And that this is how the trends eventually end up reversing themselves, which we can even see on bigger time frames when we look at like a whole year of price action in here to see this is how reversals end up playing out. So I know conceptually this seems like an abstract way to look at price action, but for those who have been with the channel for a couple of years know that we were looking at inverse price charts to be able to pick out the top of Bitcoin, and actually was able to get the top of Bitcoin both times. I actually was able to get it in here and was able to get it in here. And meanwhile, it was very difficult to do that as a content creator, especially as like a pretty large content creator, and going against the masses. The masses didn't believe in this, so it was very criticized at the time. This was when the euphoria phase. This is laser eyes and diamond hands and Wall Street bets. This is peak euphoria, ultimate criticism back in here. And then, of course, as we all know, for those who've been around, ultimate criticism in here as well. But I use these strategies to say what is happening in the final phase of exhaustion. What is happening in this exhaustive phase? And that this is mimicking precisely that. We just have to use our brains and not our eyes to say, yeah, that's what those final exhaustive phases look like. And here, when we go back and look to see how do these trends come to an end in here, and that these are how they finish. And even when we zoom out and we look at it on this aspect, this is how they finish. And I don't know how this is going to play out in regards to like Digital Currency Group and Gemini and Genesis and this January 8th date that has been set. But it's really interesting that there is this particular date, which is next Monday, or excuse me, it's Sunday, but Monday is when the date will have elapsed. We'll be past it there on January 9th on Monday. But it's like this very specific date of like potential bad, right? And we can pretend, let's say it goes really sour, right? So like I think we would all think to ourselves, okay, it's going to go really sour, it's going to go really bad, that's not good. But then you think, okay, well, what happened back in here? What happened right here at this peak? Here we are, we're talking about this exact same thing happening in here. Invert that right there. What happened? Here, I've got us on a smaller candles in here. But what happened on this date right down in here, right? Was this like really good news or really bad news? And it was actually perceived by the market as really good news happened right here, right? Mainstream adoption, validation of crypto because Coinbase IPO'd. Thing is, we knew about the date leading up to it, right? So what happens? Euphoria, excitement leading up to this date of where we're going to be validated. Crypto is going to be accepted on Wall Street. The world is accepting us. Coinbase is finally IPOing. We're validated. But that validation of ultimate respect by the world that, hey, even Wall Street has welcomed us, ends up marking the end of that. And that's all from this phase right in here. That's all from that phase of what we're talking about right here. Major positive anticipated news, knowing the date ahead of time to anticipate that really positive news. the positive news happens. But even though the positive news happens, market reverses. What do we have here on January 8th? We have anticipated potential negative news. If the negative news happens, what do we all expect? Gloom and doom, right? I would think so, right? What the heck is going to happen with Digital Currency Group? Don't know. But the point I wanted to make about it is that we had an anticipated date of epic news that was happening. And for many people like who just came into the market at that time, that may not have seemed like that big of a deal. But a lot of us who went through the 2018, 2019 bear market don't understand that places like CNBC and these financial media places, they are fudsters during the depths, and then they are retail YOLOers at the top. And that's why, you had Jim Cramer, you had Kevin O'Leary come into the market right in here. I will never sell my Bitcoin pump. Now, I won't touch it with a 20-foot pole. It's not too late to sell. That is classic CNBC stuff. And so when you are way down here and you're dealing with all this stuff of it's not too late to sell your Bitcoin, it's not too late to sell out of crypto, it's never coming back. And then when they all return back in here at this moment, and then you get epic, really good news of finally validity, Coinbase is IPOing. But that news that was anticipated way ahead of time, it wasn't like suddenly April 14th, the Coinbase IPOs. No, we knew about it leading up to it, and the market got excited about it. Excited. We get it. It happens, and then the market reverses. Right now, what do we have? We have market scared of Digital Currency Group, January 8th. It's coming. What's going to happen at that moment? And then what happens after that? So I just wanted to point that out because I know that right now on the Bitcoin price chart, we all look at this thing and think, man, this thing, hard to draw anything coming out of here at this point. But just to understand that these are the same things that we were looking at when we were looking for a reversal to happen at the top of Bitcoin, both in the spring of 2021 and in the winter of 2021. Those who were here know we were playing with inverse price charts a lot. This is the exact same thing we were looking at. And what's interesting about that time back in the spring is that we had this really positive catalyst that was going to show up, and we knew the date way ahead of time, and the positive thing did end up happening. But even though the positive thing happened, it marked the reversal of the market. So was the market already pricing in positive things to happen? Has the market already priced in the negative outcome of Digital Currency Group? I do not know what the outcome of Digital Currency Group is going to be, but I'm pretty sure a lot of people suspect if something negative happens with Digital Currency Group, that's gloom and doom. At least that's what I'm reading all over Twitter, articles, analysts, bad. So we'll find out. But structurally, it points to we're at the bottom of this move on how these things end up reversing. And we know that this one in particular was also marked with an anticipated date of something big happening. And that event was perceived to be incredibly bullish for the cryptocurrency market and validity for the cryptocurrency market, but actually marked the reversal point that exact day. So, food for thought. And I do recognize it sometimes feels silly to look at these things from this inverse perspective and think of it this way. But to recognize that not only was it this one time period here back in when Coinbase IPO'd back in the spring of 2021, but that even on our bigger time frames in here, when we were looking at all of 2021, this is how we also found the top of Bitcoin coming in here. So just a little food for thought in there that even structurally happening in here, we have the things that end up happening right as the reversal point is coming in. When you have your last plunge right to the lows, that marks the end. The only thing that varies in here, obviously, between these is what this looks like and what this looks like until you finally work your way out. But even these, right? Like you can look at each of these to see how these things happen, right? What did we end up doing? We end up coming back up in here. And then what do? We end up doing a 702 Fibonacci retracement in here, pulling all the way back. Right, what do we do in here? Pull back up, then a long road ahead. So even in these circumstances in here, you'd be looking at something eventually working its way back up, getting back into somewhere in here, and then there's still a long road ahead before the major reversal ends up happening in here. And when we look at it on a bigger time frame, you're looking at more like that, right? So I just keep that in mind. That's kind of the grand picture of what we're talking about in here. And, if you're thinking this is kind of goofy stuff, I get it. I got laughed out the door back in March, April, and May of 2021, and laughed out the door in October and November of 2021 for this. But both times it did end up happening. So both circumstances, what we saw is we saw a move. This level varied, but each pullback pulled back down to here. So getting somewhere up in here and then pulling back to the base, and then out we go. Which, of course, even with all the stuff we've been talking about for the last several weeks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 completed crashing structures. Talking about XRP as well, right? And that final flush that you have that takes you back down in here. It's all that same stuff that happens right in here before the ending, before that last flush down to the lows ends up happening. Even as we're seeing over here on Bitcoin. And what ends up happening here as well, like we're talking about in here, back up, back down to the base, and then off and away we go. So there you have it. Now, why are we talking about this? Of course, price action is boring right now. We have this big event coming up, January 8th, apparently, right? And we're also talking about how when these things eventually break out, eventually we're talking about, hey, a dip happening down in here. But once these things finally break out, they happen aggressively. We can even see that happening here for XRP in this moment right here. It broke out aggressively. And we saw that on Bitcoin in these moments in here, that these things happen aggressively. When we invert it right in here, this is an aggressive move back up. But that if we got an aggressive move to end up happening here in Bitcoin, what would happen to excitement in the market? It would become very exciting, right? But what happens in this market is we all forget that things can be grueling and grinding for a very long time, and then it can take all of it back. It can take back 6 months of price action in a matter of a couple of days, and all the people who sold out waiting for lower prices eventually find themselves in a situation where prices fired right back up really quick, and then they want to YOLO buy it right back in. But so like what I try to do is try to stay a couple steps ahead and try to like kind of visualize what am I actually seeing happening here? What typically happens after that too? And so like we're talking about, man, it would be really exciting to see prices pull up really fast. But then what would be the thought process happening after that? After that, it would be like, well, then it would be this kind of grueling pullback that would pull us back down into these levels once again. So that, yeah, it would be exciting. That would be like the marker to say, boom, that is the reversal. The reversal has happened on the bigger time frame, but it doesn't mean that we go shooting straight up right away. I mean, it means we get up here relatively quickly, but it doesn't mean we're going all the way back up into the higher reversals in a straight line that will continue from right here. And the reason I try to stay a few steps ahead is because we can anticipate the things like we're dealing with right now. This has been really boring price action here in the cryptocurrency market, like for Ethereum and for Bitcoin. But we were like staying steps ahead of it the whole time, even way back in here. We're talking about, hey, heading back to the top, then usually a pullback, and then grinding sideways. It's like, we anticipated all of these things happening, right? There's lots of YOLO excitement getting back to the top of the range, and there's lots of panic and fear. But it's trying to like kind of be like, okay, what are the things that typically come after that so that I'm not feeling those emotions that the market is typically feeling, where the market is always excited here, the market is always fearful here, and then typically in ABCs, the market gets excited right back in here again. So staying many steps ahead in here so that when a reversal does come in Bitcoin, and that breakout does happen that we're talking about, where it comes in with extreme excitement, extreme movement, and that it keeps on going, that it's like, oh man, awesome. But what usually comes next? Usually that's going to come afterwards. So just kind of like just showing you how my thoughts work and how I kind of think further ahead. And that's why these last few weeks I've really been kind of playing some clips going back to show what we were thinking about ahead of time in this stuff. And that, we've gotten the ABC to play out in here. That's great. My perspective is still like, yeah, man, let's go to the upside. This is going to be great. But there's also like these other steps that typically happen ahead of time, and trying to prevent myself from becoming emotionally connected to whatever the price action is or whatever the narrative is going to be, because, we showed all this stuff. What typically happens in these next moves is usually there's like a move down here and then it kind of grinds there for a minute. So what's going to happen is there going to be a negative story to come with it. It's going to be digital currency group. And then is it going to stay down there for a little while with a lot of negative media and a negative press to suppress the prices for a little while the retail investors are really scared down in here. And I have to kind of like be ready for that, right? But I just have to remind myself, where are we at, right? And so my grand perspective is this is where we're at. And regardless of whatever happens over the course of the next couple of days, still try not to lose vision of that. Now, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video with XRP, still from a crashing structure perspective, I do believe that was the bottom. I got a lot of comments, people saying, no, we're going to 20 cents. One thing to keep in mind, so like when I look at the XRP price chart, is that this has been our weekly support for almost 6 years. It has been a support and a resistance level right in here. And even through all of 2022, that level has been our support level, which is 32 cents. So if we saw that, if we saw 20 cents coming in here, I see a lot of people saying, no, I'm waiting to buy at 20 cents. I do think we would probably be down in these prices for a very extended period of time. So I'm not hoping to see that. I hope those that are cheering for those lower prices do recognize this is a 6-year level at 32 cents. And anybody who's been in XRP for at least 2-3 years has unquestionably seen this price way too many times to count. And it's almost an annoying price at this point, 33 cents. It's almost kind of like Litecoin's $55 price. Anybody who's been in the crypto market for a long time with Litecoin, 55 bucks has always been a price that is just always there. XRP's is this price level right here. Definitely want to see this act as a support. Otherwise, throughout the weekend, just kind of waiting on the market to show its hand. We got the things that we were waiting for an ABC to show up here in the market. Took several weeks for that to play out. Now we've got it. Let's see what happens in here as the market is starting to turn green here on Friday. As for me, trying to get this video out a little bit earlier because I do have a wedding I am going to be attending here in just a couple of hours. And so my whole weekend, this morning, this afternoon, tomorrow, all day is all dedicated to this wedding. So if there's any opportunities for me to check in those time periods, I'll do my best. It may only just end up being like Twitter posts. But it's one of those situations where, like, you know, you have that brother-in-law who you thought would just absolutely never get married in a million years is actually doing it. So everybody's pretty shocked that this is actually happening. We're all very happy for him. But it's multiple events that will take all of today and all of tomorrow. But you can check me out over here on Twitter, and I'll try to tweet if anything big happens. So as for XRP, I definitely want to see the prices that we're at hold right now, as this is a 6-year support level. As for the rest of the market, I do believe this is the bottom. I do think there's probably still a little bit of volatility to happen in here, but we're just working through those final phases. I think there's a chance things could break out to the upside, but before I start becoming like super annoying surges incoming guy, I would like to see that one thing happen with a little push down before I feel comfortable doing that. Otherwise, we're just kind of stuck right here. Prices have been in this level for a couple of days, so anything I repeat in regards to that is just repeating. But I thought today would be a good opportunity to look at the bigger perspective of Bitcoin's chart to understand how reversals have happened. And these were the same things that we saw twice in 2021 that were the reversal. And with the catalyst event potentially showing up on Sunday or Monday, I'm trying to keep those things in mind as we head into that moment. So by the time another video comes out, which will likely be on Monday, we will be in the thick of whatever's going on with Digital Currency Group. So keep an eye out for news for that. I will retweet anything that I see over here on Twitter regarding that. And fingers crossed, everything works out. But all right, guys, that's going to be it. I hope that you have a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much for watching. If you could, please like this video and give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can be notified of when I create new content and when I go live. As always, this is not investment advice and I am not a financial advisor. But if you ever need a pick-me-up or a little bit of reassurance, just remember that the blockchain backers got your back. Have a good one.